PHL 17 presents In Focus, a look at the issues affecting the Delaware Valley. Now your host, Steve Highsmith.
About 5,000 Americans are newly diagnosed each year having ALS, or amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, or Lou Gehrig's disease. Some 30,000 people in the U.S. are currently living with ALS, including hundreds of people or more in the Philadelphia region. Good morning. I'm Steve Highsmith, and welcome to In Focus. ALS is a neuromuscular disease. It's been identified for more than 140 years, but to date there is no cure. Life expectancy after diagnosis has been lengthening for some people with the advent of new health care and with people support, people power, especially through the local ALS Association chapter and the Philadelphia Phillies. More on that. Each year, the Phillies open Citizens Bank Park in the team's big heart to welcome fans into the ballpark for Phillies Festival, benefiting the ALS Association. Thousands of people, a record number, close to 7,000, turned out in 2011. Nearly $900,000 was raised. This year, Phillies Festival takes place July 26 at Citizens Bank Park. Again, more on that event, all the details coming up, how you can get involved. With me now are Larry Delaney, member of the Board of Directors of the ALS Association, Greater Philadelphia Chapter, and Karen Shideleff, who lives with ALS. She also happens to be Larry's daughter. Thanks for being here, both of you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Steve.
Larry, you've been involved for a long time now. How'd you get involved?
Well, in 1989, my wife Lorraine was diagnosed with ALS. We went to support groups and used some of the services of ALS, particularly down in Hahnemann Hospital, the ALS clinic. And following, my wife died in 1991, and a year later, I joined the board of ALS. So it was 1992, so I'd been on the board for 20 years now, and have been treasurer for the last 15 years.
So actively involved, and you know exactly how the ALS Association helps people. And I want to talk about some of those things, but there's something else that you learned as a result of your involvement here and your personal involvement, and that is that of the two major types of ALS, sporadic and familial, you have connections to the familial side. What is that? That
is correct. My wife Lorraine, her father, also had ALS. And the familial represents about 5 to 10% of ALS cases. Most ALS is sporadic. In our case, it is familial, and there is a gene that is defective, and that can continue in the family line.
And Karen, you're one that continued in that family line.
Yes, unfortunately.
Yeah. How did you find out about this? What was the first sign that you had that something was amiss?
Well, I did know that I had a 50% chance of getting this disease, so and had a lot of knowledge about the disease from watching my mother suffer with it.
Well, and you're also in the medical profession.
And I'm a nurse, right? So it certainly helps. I did notice almost 2 years ago now that my footsteps were sounding differently when I was walking my dogs, and that I was having trouble with my big toe and balance issues. So I just kind of sat on it and watched to see what kind of progression I had over the next several months before I made any broad announcement that I, was suspecting that I had ALS.
And one cautionary tale that you would give to everybody is, especially since you're a nurse, is that any early onset of anything can look like 1,000 different diseases.
Yes, and people tell me all the time the symptoms of this disease, especially early on, mimic so many things that you could make yourself a little crazy thinking that you had ALS or any other disease early on.
So when you thought, well, okay, this didn't go away or it's progressing, what was your next step? Did you go to a doctor? What did you do?
I did. Fortunately, my husband's cousin is an ALS specialist at Lehigh, Dr. Glenn Mackin. So I did call him. I kind of had an in, and he got me in fairly quickly. And for most people, the diagnosis takes probably 6 months or more, even up to over a year. I did get diagnosed fairly quickly given the family history. So EMGs, MRIs, blood tests.
What is your experience as you talk to other folks who live with ALS and their families about this diagnosis? You said, some people it can take longer. Right. Going back a number of years, we hear cases of some folks it took years to diagnose because of different things. Is the medical profession getting better at that with whatever markers they have, or just more in tune? How's that working now?
I think that definitely they are getting better at diagnosing. It is a diagnosis of exclusion. You're basically ruling out many other disease processes because they can mimic each other. So I think hopefully most people are getting diagnosed in less than 6 months. Like we said, the early symptoms are fairly vague, so a lot of people don't go to the doctor until their symptoms are a little bit more evident.
So it's been about a year or so since you've been officially diagnosed?
Officially diagnosed a year ago.
And so how has it been in that last year? Have you seen more progression, or how's that work?
I have seen more progression, slower than what I originally thought, which is great. It's very, very good. But it's been for all intents and purposes, a very good year for me. I have a lot of support with my family. Obviously, I do have 3 sisters, and we all have a lot of knowledge about ALS in general. My friends all knew, my close friends all knew that I had this possibility of getting ALS, so they've been involved in ALS events over the years with our family. So telling everybody was very difficult, but the support that I'm getting in return has been amazing.
Larry, the kinds of support that the ALS chapter presents, let's take a look at some of them. And
okay.
You know, you almost can't you can under quantify, you can't overstate the impact this could have for any one individual. But there are resource groups that are available, you have home visits, you have equipment loan programs, assistive technology programs, there are recreational and educational programs and programs for healthcare professionals, which is also very important. Any of those strike you as you go, wow, you know what, I'm glad we have that program because it really makes a difference?
I think the programs that make the most difference are the ones that provide direct help to the patient. We have a transportation program so that we can take patients that are wheelchair bound to events like a Phillies game, you know, to a Longwood Gardens. There's a trip down there that we do every year to try to keep the patients in the flow of normal life. We do things of that nature. We have a respite program that we can then get the help into the home so that the caregiver will have some time to do their normal activities.
And by caregiver, is that usually a family person, or are we talking about a professional caregiver?
Well, normally the family is very involved in the caregiving.
And the family is impacted by this too, Karen. I mean, you obviously knew that. It's probably one reason why you didn't tell other people for a while, you know, because, oh, they're all going to freak out, they're all going to do whatever they're doing. How do you think they have responded to this in your case?
Great. You know, obviously the initial telling everybody was very difficult. Everyone takes a little bit of time to absorb the information and obviously process it differently. But everyone's really stepped up. They've been helping me as I've progressed, and I don't have as much capability to do things that I, you know, would have done a year ago. They've just stepped up and really helped me, whether it's taking down the Christmas decorations, going with me to certain events, because I get tired, whereas before I didn't get as tired as I do now. So I've actually, it's like I said, it's been a very good year for me. The ALS Association actually loaned me several parts of the ramp that allows me to get out of the back of my house because I can't do steps without a railing, and my deck stairs don't have a railing on them because it's a very low deck. So it's things like that. They saved me over $4,000 on ramping, which is a big deal.
I'm still thinking about the Christmas decorations. So you're not using any of this as a leverage, right? It's like, because nobody ever wants to take down the Christmas decorations. No,
I would never do that.
You would never do it. Now, so obviously you were working, you're a nurse and all this, and have you had to leave that work?
No, I'm fortunate enough that where I work, they have been able to keep me on in a position that requires less physical activity. I don't work at a hospital anymore. If I was still working at a hospital, I don't think that I would be able to work right now. I don't have the stamina or the strength to be on my feet for 8 or 12 hours. So I am very lucky that my employers have been very good with me.
And your sisters, and you said that they are, you know, because they were in tune because of the family situation, but they're all helping out, or is there a slacker among the three?
No.
You want to call out?
No, I'm not going to call anybody out. My sisters are awesome. They're the best friends anyone could ever ask for, and they're very supportive, sometimes overly supportive. No, they're great. They check on
actually,
me.
You know, that's a good point, because one of the things that you know, people have told me over the years is they said, you know, there's a time we really appreciate the support, and sort of an intelligent support in particular. But at times, it's also important for families to know when to say, okay, they want to be alone, or I don't need to help them that much. They can do this and that. Do you find that too?
To a degree, yes. I think everybody needs their own time, and sometimes, you know, that's the case. But I don't think there's any such thing as too much support.
You agree?
I agree.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, when we talk about the different types that are out there, and the familial is what we've been talking about in this case, but you mentioned sporadic, which is before, and that's what 90%, 95% of people who will develop ALS. They're in that category, right?
That is correct,
and
yes.
do we know, is there a difference in terms of the manifestation of the symptoms or anything else in the progression of the illness between the two different types, or just where they come from?
No, there's no difference in the symptoms and how the disease progresses. Within the ALS, besides sporadic and the familial ALS, there's another separation, which is bulbar and
limb
presentation. The bulbar starts where the problems initiate with speaking and swallowing. And that represents, I think, about 20% of the cases start that way.
So there's sort of an upper neurological and a lower neurological
right.
impact. We'll have more on what we know about ALS today and the folks who are on the front lines, plus Phillies Fest in a moment on PHL 17. In Focus continues on PHL 17. I'm Steve Highsmith. This morning we're talking about living with ALS, the research underway, and the support available to a person diagnosed with disease. And we're hearing about some of the experiences a person has living with ALS. With me are Larry Delaney, member of the Board of Directors of the ALS Association, Greater Philadelphia Chapter, and Karen Shideleff, who lives with ALS and is also Larry's daughter. So when people interact with government, with insurance companies, and anyone else that isn't directly related to it, patience is always a virtue. Is the chapter able to realize that there can be those frustrations and help people navigate the process?
Yes. We have a social worker who works in the Philadelphia office, and we also have social workers in the outlying areas who also work with patients and helping them through the jungle of the medical insurance problems.
How do you describe the progress of research? There is so much research going on.
The research, I guess for about 20 years now, there has been an increase in the amount of research being done. And that research is starting to target particular areas that are causing the problems. And
they've identified a couple of genes, like the SOD1 gene, for example?
Yes, yeah, the SOD1 gene is
yeah.
the one that Karen has. She was diagnosed with that. There are about 170 mutations of that gene. So that originally it wasn't thought that Karen had that, but further checking found that she did have one of those mutations.
There's a lot of research that goes on in different streams. Obviously, people would ideally like to have a cure, but treatment is also another. And just in our area in Doylestown, ALS Biopharma is doing research on a heat shock protein therapy, for example, and other kinds of things. So it really is a fluid and exciting time for that. One of the things that the chapter tries to do, though, and I think the National Association, is it tries to facilitate these trials and tries to speed the time between the research and the actual application to the patient.
That is correct.
And that obviously there are good medical sound reasons for going at the proper pace, but you do feel sometimes this can be speeded up.
It can be. And one of the ways we do that is by funding grants for scientists who are what we call seeding money. They're looking at a new idea. They're looking at an established a idea established by somebody else and trying to take that further, so that it's very hard for them to get funding from the government for new ideas of that nature. So the ALS Association, we fund a lot of research of that nature.
And this research is made possible in significant part by the largesse of people who donate to the association, and also the fundraisers that you hold throughout the year. There's the hot chocolate event at the aquarium in March. You have walks throughout the year. You have Phillies Fest in the summer. In fact, let's take a look right now at last year's Phillies Fest. What you're going to see is a good bit of what goes on there with the players and the people who go to that event, and also hear from a couple of folks who are living with ALS and the significance of that event for them. Take a look.
This event started as, believe it or not, a dozen players and their wives putting on a fashion show in the mid-'80s. Probably we raised in the neighborhood of $50,000. And now, of course, it's grown to roughly 700,000 or 800,000.
When I was diagnosed in 2006, I became active in the ALS Association, and I basically started coming out probably about the year after, and just got to know how great of an event it was. A lot of times you feel alone having ALS, and an event like this really makes you feel like there are a lot of people pulling for you. You see all the players that are here on their day off, working and pulling for ALS, and see all the people who come out. It really is a great feeling to know that people, are there for you.
When they give you a diagnosis such as Lou Gehrig's disease, they kind of say, we have no treatments, we have nothing you can do, and kind of go home and go retire and then live your life. And they said, but make this one phone call to the ALS Association. And I really didn't get it at first, but once you reach out to them, they are there for everything. Patient services, anything you need, transportation, loaner equipment. I've had so many great things to say about the ALS Association, and this event, which raises money for them, they wouldn't be able to do it without the Phillies.
And to go to Phillies Festival, to find out more information, first of all, reserve your calendar for July 26th of 2012, July 26th of this year. It's at Citizens Bank Park, of course, and you can find out information in a couple of ways. You can, of course, go to alsphiladelphia.org, or you can check out the Philadelphia Phillies, and they've got all the information there, and you'll find out how to get tickets. You'll also find out if it's sold out, because it is a popular event. So check it out. You guys have gone in the past. A lot of fun?
A lot of fun. It's just, a very good vibe. Everybody's happy. The players are there. They're very happy. They're very gracious. A lot of kids. Kids always bring smiles to the faces.
Weather's always great.
Of course, the weather's always great.
And did you get any good autographs while you were there?
Shane Victorino.
All right, well, I think that's a good one.
I believe so, yes.
And is it, how long is it? I mean, how long do you actually, can you be on site there?
The event lasts about 3 hours. There's 2-hour signing period where the players sign, and there are all other events going on at the same time. And then it ends up with an auction where a lot of valuable baseball paraphernalia.
Is that the silent auction where we saw on the tables there, or is there a live auction?
There's both.
Both.
There's a silent auction that takes place while the event is going on, and then the event concludes with a live auction.
Oh, that's awesome. And again, there are just so many ways that people can get involved, and we're going to give the information again so that you can get in touch with the ALS Association, the Philadelphia chapter, a little bit later on. This money gets used, as we said, for research. It gets used for support services. You've talked about a couple of ways that you can be helped. Have you talked with other folks who have ALS?
I have. At various events, you obviously see other ALS patients there. And it's not... We don't talk necessarily about what ALS is doing to us. We talk about the feeling of these events and the fact that we're getting so much support, and give each other ideas of how to get around better, where you can find a good cane, things like that. But everything has been very positive at all of the events, even going to the ALS Association for certain things, meeting with the social workers. Everything is positive. Everything is meant to make your life easier.
Would you give any advice to someone who is newly diagnosed? Is there a first step to take, either mentally?
Yeah, much like Gary said, call the ALS Association. That's the first step you should take. But yeah, you really do need to sit down and just absorb the diagnosis, do your research if you don't have that background where you know what it is, and just give yourself a minute to take it all in before you start telling people. It's a very big diagnosis. And you really have to be okay with it before you start sharing it. And
when you deal with, as you do as a board member, with other folks who are involved with the chapter and everything they want to do, what's the general feeling of folks in the chapter? Are they optimistic? Are they positive? They're working hard? How would you describe them?
Well, working hard, certainly. Yeah. Optimistic. We're optimistic that we're going in the right direction. And what we're trying to do is to end this disease, find a way to end it. Until that happens, what we try to do is to make the lives of ALS patients easier, try to provide them with transportation, as I mentioned earlier, ramps, home modifications if that's necessary, respite care, in-home care. There's a lot of programs that help the patients to live as normal a life as they can.
Do you have people who can go around from home to home and take down Christmas tree decorations? Is that the...
We have a slew of volunteers.
Three sisters, there you go.
Yeah, we have a lot of
another
volunteers.
career they could do.
That's right.
But so as you then look at what you'd like to do for other people who are living with this, do you feel that there's any sort of a reluctance to talk about it, or do you feel that, no, you talk to somebody about it, they'll talk about it?
I will talk to anybody about it that wants to talk about it. Some people do get a little nervous talking to me. They don't know what to say or to say the wrong thing. There really is no wrong thing to say. And anybody that's having a hard time or troubled by the diagnosis, certainly I think any ALS patient would be willing to talk with them.
All right, we'll have more on ALS in a moment as we continue on PHL 17. Stay tuned. We're back on In Focus with Larry Delaney and Karen Shideleff of the ALS Association, Greater Philadelphia chapter. Karen, there's one drug that I've heard about that some people can use in the last few years, or at least early on, and it's Ralutech.
Yes.
Are you a candidate for that?
I do take that, and fortunately I was involved in a research study that allowed me to continue taking that. It is the only drug that is approved for ALS patients.
What does that do? How does it affect you?
What it can do is prolong your survival, especially respiratory involved. So people with ALS, their diaphragm weakens, so respiratory status decreases. So the Ralutech is thought to help with that respiratory status.
Larry, as you interact with folks in the medical profession, how would you describe the lack of or the great volume of knowledge that the profession generally has today in trying to help people early on in this? Because I notice you do have clinics for healthcare professionals to help them.
Yes, we do. We go to different health facilities, the nurses that we employ in the association, and we'll give in-house seminars to the medical people to teach them about ALS and to teach them what ALS patients need and how that might differ from other types of diseases.
Yeah, I think there's also a misnomer, and correct me if I'm wrong, we've for so long have called this Lou Gehrig's disease, and so a lot of people may think that, well, only guys get it, but obviously about half the people who get it are about half the population.
Yeah.
Yes.
So now, of the ways that people can help, we mentioned Phillies Fest, but there are also walks involved, for example.
There are walks throughout the tri-state area. I think there's 7, and our walk in particular, the Greater Philadelphia Walk, raised $1.4 million.
Wow.
It's the highest amount of money we've ever raised, and actually the highest amount raised throughout the country this year.
So the bottom line for folks is that obviously this is something worth supporting, but if you think a family member is affected by this or yourself, get involved right away. Obviously go see your doctor, but beyond that, contact the chapter. If someone calls up and says, I've just been diagnosed with ALS, do you guys have a standard thing you say right at first?
I don't actually know. Okay. I don't think there's a script for that.
I mean, basically what I heard from Gehrig was chill, relax. Take some time to absorb it. But you do then kind of walk them through the process, I guess?
Yes. We arrange to meet with them, find out where they are as far as their doctors are concerned. If they're interested in going to the clinic, if it's in the Philadelphia area, we have a clinic at Penn. If they're in the central Pennsylvania area, we have a clinic at Hershey. These are some of the other areas. And they're all free of charge to the patients. The patients can go and receive, they see a doctor, they see a nurse, they see a social worker, they see a physical therapist, an occupational therapist, a speech therapist. Nutrition. There's about 8 disciplines that they see at one meeting.
Wow.
Where they go and sit in a room, and then the professionals come to them, so they can take care of all their needs at one time.
So it is very convenient.
It's very convenient. It's one appointment. It usually lasts about 3 hours, but you see everybody. You're not going to the doctor every week. So. And
done in a compassionate way and in a very normal, everyday way, which is good.
It's unbelievable how compassionate the professionals are, the medical professionals.
And your dad, how's he been through all this stuff here?
My dad's awesome. Now I can say that.
This is the one that's awesome right here.
Well, I was going to say, I thought I got to look like that's not what you say to me when we're not on camera.
No, he's always been awesome, but he's been a great role model for us, especially with his volunteering with the ALS Association, and he's just a very strong person for all of us.
And the sisters, you're still not calling any of them out?
I'm not calling any of them out. They're awesome too.
But you would say, hey, contact people and just start talking and get involved and do those things and encourage research. Get the government and private sector involved to find out more about just how the body works, how these genes become defective, and if there are triggers for them, if there are environmental triggers, or there are other things that maybe things can be done.
That's what we're trying to find out.
Thank
awesome.
you.
You are awesome. Both of you are awesome.
I appreciate it.
For more information on the ALS Association, check out alsphiladelphia.org. That's alsphiladelphia.org. Look for fundraiser information there, too. As I said, they've got the hot chocolate event, the walks throughout the year. We heard about 7 of them. And, of course, the Phillies Festival in July. And that's In Focus for this week. I'm Steve Highsmith. Thanks for joining us. Have a great weekend and a wonderful week ahead.